This episode of Decoding TV is brought to you by McDonald's, proudly serving communities since 1965. McDonald's, I'm loving it. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Decoding TV, a podcast about television. I am David Chen.
And I'm Patrick Willems.
Welcome to the show. On today's episode of Decoding TV, we're going to be discussing Season 1, Episode 12 of Andor on Disney+. Rix Road is the name of the episode. This episode was directed by Benjamin Caron and written by Tony Gilroy. It's also the Season 1 finale of Andor. Patrick, can you believe it?
David, we're at the end.
We're at the end.
Oh my God. No more Andor. No more weekly Wednesday conversations with David.
About
I guess we could.
Yeah, we could still talk just like as friends, but like, what's the point of that exactly? You know?
David, in 2022, what's the point of having a friendship if you're not creating content in the process?
I ask myself that question literally every day. You can find more episodes of this podcast at podcast.decodingtv.com. Email us at decodingtv@gmail.com. And find us on TikTok, Twitter, and YouTube at Decoding TV. Now, Patrick Willems, I do just want to start by saying a big thank you to you. This is our first sort of regular podcast we've done together, and have really appreciated you bringing your talents to Decoding TV and helping us analyze the show. Obviously, I think it's very obvious that like a sort of significant community has sprung up around this podcast and this show. And I want to start actually by saying a huge thank you to a couple of parties. Number one, if you want to support a show like Decoding TV, you can become a paid member at decodingtv.com. And the paid members really help this podcast to keep running. I pay everyone who I co-host a show with, including Patrick. And the people at decodingtv.com who pay for memberships, they help me to pay people. So if you love podcasts like this and want to support this podcast and help it keep going in the future, decodingtv.com, you get access to early episodes, ad-free episodes, and more. The other thing I want to do is thank all the people who replied to Apple Podcasts this week. I think you probably caught a little bit of this, Patrick.
I agree. Seriously, like Apple.
Well, Apple put out the call. They're like, who do you listen to for your Andor coverage? And they often put together editorial lists of like, check out Andor coverage, and they'll list like 15, 20 podcasts that you should listen to. And I think they were like going fishing to see like which podcast should we put in the list. And I would say dozens of people responded to Apple Podcasts and says, you got to get your content from the Decoding TV with Patrick Willems and David Chen, right? And
it was so nice.
Go ahead. It was lovely.
It was very nice to see. I also, scanning through those mentions or those replies to the initial tweet, there are a lot of podcasts covering Andor that I was not aware of. We've got some serious competition. I don't know if the competition is good, but it's out there.
I don't think that's true, Patrick. I'm pretty sure we are the only Andor podcast out there. So I'm just, that's just my take on it. But
you know what? You're probably right. I think people were just making up fake podcasts.
I think that has to be what happened. That has to be what happened. So
it was all those bots that Elon Musk is always talking about being a major issue on Twitter.
100%. Thank you to everyone for suggesting us. And if Apple does indeed put us in a place of great honor on their homepage, thank you so much to Apple. And if they don't, you're cowards. You're cowards. Okay. But
David,
thank you, everyone.
Not have said it better myself.
All right. A couple of other things I want to mention before we get into episode 12, just very quickly. And I do want to say, by the way, that like the big announcement is Patrick and I are going to try to do one bonus episode sometime in the next week or two that just is like a postmortem responding to emails and comments. So if you want to get potentially your message read on that episode, email us at decodingtv@gmail.com or make a nice, interesting comment at youtube.com/decodingtv, and we'll get to it on the bonus episode. So this will not be the last conversation that Patrick and I have about Andor this year that is in podcast form. Obviously, some people might also be wondering, hey, what's the future of the Patrick David Chen collaboration? And I don't know. I would say it is a pretty safe bet that we will be covering Andor Season 2. But that is probably not going to happen for over a year. So we're probably in 2024 when Andor Season 2 comes out, right?
As in, they started shooting, I believe, mere days ago.
Yeah.
And I believe that Tony Gilroy said, I think it was in a Collider interview, that production will wrap summer 2023.
Right. So it's got to be 2024 earliest is my guess, right?
There's as much as we talk about how this show is like shooting in real locations and building sets and stuff like that, there's still a lot of visual effects. Post-production, I imagine, is incredibly lengthy. ILM is working on this, and they're working on it. They have a lot of stuff to work on. So it's probably going to be 2024. And I'm just going to say, I don't know what the future holds for me. I don't know what it holds for you. Actually, I know what it holds for you. A lot of podcasting. But I don't know where I'll be in the world, in my life in 2024. But when Andor season 2 drops, I'm going to be right here, baby, talking about it on Decoding TV.
Yeah, I mean, I have been really blessed to be able to work with folks like Patrick and Don Marshall and Siddhant Adlaka and Ashley Esqueda and Kim Renfro, and I think I'm missing. Oh, and Roxanne Haddadi, and I think that's everyone. I'm sorry if I'm forgetting one person. There might be one or two people I'm forgetting there, but anyway, part of the pitch to Patrick Willems is, hey, come in, join me for 3 months, talk about Andor, and then go off and leave and do your own thing. There's no like long-term commitment here. I would love to work with Patrick again. I will pitch Patrick things in the future, and it's possible that something else might happen. But until then, the only thing that is for certain is Andor season 2 is going to happen, and we will probably be podcasting about it.
Yes. So this was the perfect. I mean, like, David, I remember when you called me on the phone. I think you were in the car and you were like, I have a pitch for you. You're probably going to say no. And then I thought about it for like a full week because I was like genuinely like, and this is not like, I to be fully clear, I love talking to David. I always love like working with David on anything. But I was like, I was enjoying not having a weekly podcast commitment and also not talking about Star Wars publicly. And so my first instinct was just to say no. And I was like, but I don't know. And then like a splinter in my mind, it just stayed there for the next week and I couldn't let it go and and like you gave me so many opportunities to just like to peace out and like and not do it. And I could not resist. And I not to get too sincere here, but I am so glad that I decided to do it. This has been such a fun experience.
That's so lovely. I'm glad you had a good time, as did I. I think it's been great, and I'm hoping we can figure out how to keep the Patrick David party going on for another show or for something else. We'll see, but Patrick and I will continue to stay in touch, obviously, and we'll see what happens. Okay. Let's talk about show-related stuff. There's just a couple of quick show-related things I want to get to before we get to this actual episode. One thing that came up in the last week is a lot of people speculating Marva's not dead. Because we never see her dead body, and she doesn't die on screen. And I think this is part of I actually like understand this sentiment, this like inclination is like, I do think it's a fair thing to expect that if you don't show the dead body, people will theorize that the person's not dead. That is like kind of a, I don't expect Tony Gilroy to respect those rules, but I think that in general, on TV, it's kind of a rule these days where there's been enough times when you've thought someone's dead and they've come back because you never saw their body that it's like okay to expect that. That said, go ahead.
I was going to say, I feel like it's the kind of thing that we usually see this in like, in like an action scene or whatever. If there's a big explosion and then like that kind of thing where or if there's like a cliffhanger and we've been trained to understand that like if we are not looking at a dead body on screen, there's probably going to be a big reveal that they're alive. And
go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, I totally get the impulse to like assume that because TV and movies have kind of trained us to think that way. Also, but like knowing this show and what its like MO seems to be, I never for a sec, like personally, I never suspected that they would reveal that she's alive.
I agree with you. but people were like, yeah, it's really suspicious. They did the whole funeral procession. They didn't show the body at all. I guess it's just because the actor wasn't available that day. But um, I also think that it's not past something that Tony Gilroy would do. If you look at his movies like Michael Clayton and Duplicity, uh, those movies both do this thing where they show you a scene and then they show you literally that scene later again in a different context, and like, haha, did you, it's like he likes pulling tricks on the audience. But
Or
I will say, yeah.
one of the wildest examples in terms of things Tony Gilroy wrote, the final scene of The Bourne Supremacy takes place about 2/3 of the way through The Bourne Ultimatum.
Yes, exactly. So he's done stuff like that before, but this show has not really trafficked in those kinds of reveals, I think, in general.
Yeah,
So,
he also, like, looking at his stuff, he isn't. I feel like he's not generally interested in like big mysteries or like like surprise, shocking reveals and stuff like that. Honestly, not even like a ton of cliffhangers. He's like, I feel like he likes to put his cards on the table and just be like, here are compelling characters, and I'm going to tell you a story with them.
I don't know if I quite agree with that formulation. Like, I think we're
Okay.
mostly on the same page, but I guess like there was a New Yorker profile on Tony Gilroy many years ago when Duplicity came out, where he basically said like, I do like he feels he's in an arms race with the audience because audiences like are so smart these days. He needs to do more and more things to trick them. Um, and so I do think he does that kind of stuff, but I think what you're saying about like surprise reveals is like Marva shows up with a blaster and like starts shooting people, like that's what
Yeah.
you're thinking in terms of reveal, and like that kind of reveal he generally doesn't do. I would agree with that.
Right.
That said, there will be people who still think Marva is alive even after this episode,
Because
because
I'm sure they'll be saying like, but if she was so old and frail and about to die, how was she able to
yeah,
record
right.
this whole
And
hologram
you don't
message?
actually see her, dead body. So like it's there was still, but in my opinion, this episode puts to bed the idea that Marva's still alive.
Yeah.
Other people may disagree, but I wanted to acknowledge that that's a huge line of questioning that has sprung up since last episode. Okay, random note. We did not point out that B2EMO, it can also be pronounced B2EMO, which is a perfect name for that droid.
It is.
So I don't, pretty on the nose, I have to say. And then the only other thing I wanted to mention is Anto Krieger. We had speculated whether we
R.I.P.
would ever see, whether, yeah, RIP. We've speculated whether we'd ever see Anto Krieger, and we I think we had concluded we're probably not going to see Anto Krieger. And I don't have the exact tweet. I apologize, but somebody tweeted at us a link to a person's tweet who was the model for Anto Krieger, basically. Like, this guy claimed, he's like, I am the guy who they modeled Anto Krieger on. I went in, they took a body scan of me and then used it for the hologram. And it was like a 1-day job. So then it's like, okay, we're probably never going to meet Anto Krieger and he's probably dead. I think it's kind of cool. And that is in fact what happens. We never meet Anto Krieger. We only know him through hologram. He dies horribly this episode off screen. But I did think that was cool. That like, that's the first time I've ever had something kind of spoiled from like knowing that a guy went in for a body scan for a hologram. I just put that out there.
It's the kind of thing where I would have honestly assumed, now that we know we're, unless season 2 gives us like a flashback, which I think is unlikely, but we're probably never going to see more of Anto Krieger.
Yeah.
I would have honestly assumed that they would, and you hear about this happening sometimes in productions, and especially, like Pixar does this kind of thing a lot, that they would just get a guy who, like, I don't know, works in like the prop room, or doesn't, basically, if it's like, if all they need is the physical appearance of a person who also looks a lot like just like a regular guy, that they would just grab someone who's already on the production and just be like, here, take a few hours, do this body scan, then you can get back to work, I don't know, on the sound mix or whatever.
Yeah. Okay, so those are just a few follow-ups. Let's get into this week's episode, Rix Road, the season 1 finale of Andor. Patrick Willems, overall thoughts on the episode?
I've watched this episode twice, and I think it's a pretty incredible finish. I mean, I feel like I I don't want to like start like a whole like long monologue on all on all of the stuff that's going on in it. But as we knew from the last one, they're bringing every single character on the show except for Saw Gerrera together in one place, pretty much on the same street at the same time. And this, okay, here's what I'll say. I think this episode specifically, more so than any, I'm not saying this is the best episode of the season, but more so than any of the other episodes, this is the episode that really fulfills, to me, the promise that Rogue One had, but was never able to like fully realize. Like I think we talked about this on our initial Rogue One bonus episode, but to me, the most compelling scene in Rogue One is the really messy like shootout battle in the streets of Jeddah. The part where you actually see like, oh, here is a planet that is like an occupied territory that's being occupied by this imperial force, and then there is this like there are like these rebels just like hiding and throwing bombs, and there's crying children in the streets, and suddenly it takes the Star Wars that we're familiar with, but it shows it to us through a very different lens, a lens that that really brings to mind like real world revolutions and like guerrilla fighters and like occupying imperial forces and stuff like that, and just like the messiness of modern war. And then watching this episode where like the bulk of the episode is about the build up to and then the actual like blow up of this riot in the streets of Ferrix, where you have the Empire opening fire on a crowd of unarmed civilians, where you have these regular people who are not the Rebel Alliance. They are just a community of regular civilians who are pushed to a point of violence. And you've got like, you have one character building a homemade bomb to throw at this thing. Like this is like this is basically like the Boston Massacre of the Galactic Civil War, and I found it so exciting, like just both moving and exhilarating to watch this kind of thing play out in this franchise, in the timeline of the Star Wars saga that we're so familiar with, and I feel like that kind of promise of like, oh, it's Star Wars, but like with a kind of real world, actual war perspective, was like kind of what Rogue One promised. And this episode in particular, I feel like is absolutely the fulfillment of that.
Fascinating. I really liked the episode as well. I thought it was very good. But I'm a little bit cooler on it than you, as is typical in this podcast. I think I really started to feel the constraints. And I've been telling you this too. I've really started to feel the constraints of this format of, we're doing like multi-episode arcs, like every 3 episodes, every 3 episodes, every 3 episodes. In this case, we got like a transition episode and then 2 episodes. All the stuff around the funeral was excellent. I mean, we had this season 4 white knuckle sequences. We had the first Ferrix Cassian escape, Aldhani, Narkina 5 escape, and then this funeral scene. That's like 4 amazing set pieces in the course of one season, and that's a huge accomplishment. And so all the funeral stuff I thought was great. I did feel like this didn't feel to me like a season 1 finale where I'm like, they tied up like most of the big loose ends and they left open a bunch of interesting possibilities for the second season. It did feel to me like we're in the middle of a story that's just interrupted a little bit, and that is a little bit of a bummer,
I will say, I kind of felt like that the first time I watched it, and then the second time, the stuff that maybe I was the second time around, elements like, what about Vel and Cinta?
Right.
Things like that, where I was like, that doesn't have any kind of conclusion, stuff like that. That I didn't really mind as much, and the stuff that like I feel like the broader strokes that the episode is like painting with, and also like the main primary stuff involving like the people of Ferrix hit even harder, and so basically I gave it an extra point on my second viewing.
Fair enough. I would say, and let me just like talk a little, just really quickly about some of the things that I'm referring to when I say like it feels a little bit interrupted. Yes, the Vel and Cinta stuff. It feels like we got a little bit of it, but it felt like we needed. I want more scenes with those two because they're such interesting characters, and I want to see like where that ends up. Obviously, there's some bigger, like overarching plot lines that we never followed up with from the first season. Cassian's sister, which opened the season. Like, are we ever going to get back to that? Maybe in season 2, and is Kino Loy still alive? The guy's family from Aldani, like who were left behind, like what there's all these little things where I'm like, what's going on with these? And that's fine. Like it's fine for a show to leave that stuff unanswered, but in this episode specifically, there's stuff like, first of all, Luthen's plan sucks ass in this episode. Like Luthen, who's in the whole season, has been built up to be like a complete badass who has like planning 6 moves ahead chess wise. His plan is, we're gonna follow the Imperials until they track down Andor, and then we'll kill him. I'm like, what are you talking about, man? Like this plan makes no sense, and of course it doesn't even come close to succeeding because he has no idea what the hell he's doing. So that was kind of silly to me. And then Cinta and Vel, like that whole situation, like what was the whole purpose of Cinta even being there the whole time? She murders Corv. It's like, what was the point of that? Like, it felt like completely like, unmotivated it felt like it served no real purpose at that point. So those are a few things from this episode. I'm kind of like, oh, like it feels like we're interrupting this in the middle of the story. Like, where's everyone going? And then there's a handful of stuff in the episode that I'm just like, this doesn't really make much sense to me. Like, where is this go? What was the point of this? That said, as I, to return back to it, all the funeral stuff, how it's set up and executed, the fallout from it is excellent. And of course, we had some extremely high quality content this week. And I can't, for that alone, it's got to be, I got to give some. So I would say this is a very good finale. It's not, most episodes of the show, I'm like, that was incredible. That was amazing. This is one of the best things I've ever seen. This is a very good finale. And I do feel like, okay, well, now I got to watch season 2 to like understand the whole arc of what they're planning. And maybe then I'll go back and it'll be like, oh, yes, this is just a transition to what was coming next. But I personally believe that a season should have like a pretty satisfying story overall. And this one did. Like the Cassian arc is very good. But just some of the other stuff I felt like wasn't as well paid off as it could have been. Like the Mon stuff is another example. But anyway,
right.
Yeah.
Mon has 2 scenes in the episode. And the second one is basically like 3 shots with no dialogue.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. It's well, I mean, like the thing with Mon at least is like her storyline like gets an ending, or at least like like that has then like it arrives at a definitive point, which is then a setup for like new things.
Yeah.
And but yeah, it is the thing where I mean, granted, all this time, Luthen and co are trying to find Cassian while he's in a prison for months. And so I'm assuming at this point they're fairly desperate. Like, okay, we finally have some kind of lead on where the hell in the galaxy he might be. We like all in on this. But yeah, I totally hear what you're saying about like, this is, especially like by Luthen standards, not a great plan. But I'm also like, I don't really know what else they do, because they
even
don't.
Luthen going there at all like exposes him to enormous danger. Like it's like, okay, his plan sucks, and he shouldn't have even been there. I don't know.
I think that's the thing. It's actually, that's what. And I can imagine them in the writers' room like getting frustrated about this, because it's like, Vel and Cinta are very capable like on their own,
Yeah,
clearly
totally.
pulled off Aldani. Cinta will just stab dudes. Another one of those things, like in Star Wars, we don't often see people just getting stabbed with not
Yeah,
lightsabers, with
yeah,
like
yeah,
a
yeah.
knife. But they're capable of this. Why does Luthen, the guy that the ISB is trying to find, why is he also there? Except for the fact that you have to have the final scene.
Yes, exactly. Yeah,
That
which is admittedly great. It's a great final scene.
yeah,
Also, apparently, Luthen only knows one parking spot on Ferrix, and he just keeps going back there. Because he's scoped out a good spot. Okay, everyone who lives in New York knows that you need to have, if you have a good parking spot, you can't like give that up, right? So
excuse me. Everyone in New York really knows that it's pointless to have a car because parking is so miserable and difficult. It's
mhm,
not worth
mhm.
bothering with.
By the way, one last thing. I meant to do this in the preamble, but I forgot to mention youtube.com/decoding TV. I think that's where this comment came from. It might have also been to decodingtv@gmail.com. But somebody last week pointed out, you and I were talking about the Luthen escaping from the Cantwell class arrestor cruiser. Like, what was the point of that? Other than Luthen being really badass. And narratively, somebody points out they now have probably a recording of Luthen's voice. And
Yes.
Karn has said that he can positively identify the voice of Axis.
Yeah.
So I was thinking that might pay off this week, but it hasn't. And so it's very possible that will pay off in season 2. But anyway, just wanted to call that out. I'm placing my bets that that's going to pay off in season 2. So
It's interesting. I believe they've already confirmed that there will be like some degree of a time jump in
mhm.
season 2. Like it's not gonna just pick up with Luthen saying, "Yes, you're in. Let's go." Uh,
Yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
so it makes me wonder: are we gonna like immediately jump in with like Cassian and Vel and Cinta like going on missions for Luthen and stuff like that? I don't know. We'll do our season 2 speculation later.
Yeah. Well, so those are some overall thoughts of the episode before we get to some more in-depth discussion. But Patrick, Luthen wants to get Cassian. He's telling Vel and Cinta to get Cassian. And it all seems like a big misunderstanding to me. You know? It all feels like if they just had a better sense of community with each other, maybe if they shared a meal with each other, they wouldn't be so at odds with each other. And I bring that up because this episode of Decoding TV is brought to you by McDonald's, proudly serving community since 1965.
David, can I just say, if we're talking about
Yes.
community,
Yeah.
the people of Ferrix have a really good, tight knit community there.
Yeah.
And like they understand community and like I think much better than Luthen's group does. And I was just thinking when they all when Brasso
Yeah.
and Bix and everybody when they load onto that ship to get away, like they look these people who care about community.
Yeah.
They want a break. They've just experienced this riot. They've watched their friends die. If I were them, and I know this is not canonically true in the Star Wars universe, I'm aware. If I were them, once I get off Ferrix, I would just swing by the first McDonald's that I find.
It's
Because
so
that,
true.
yeah,
Yeah. Because first of all, the food is delicious. But secondly, McDonald's really cares about fostering a sense of community. And one of the ways they do that is through their wonderful crew members who work hard to truly make you feel like you're right at home when you stop by a McDonald's. And I'm certain that if McDonald's did exist in space, that McDonald's incredible crew members would make folks like Brasso and Bix and everyone, all the daughters of Ferrix, feel right at home with their meal. I know when I go to McDonald's, I get fast and friendly service. I have one right down the street from me. It's like a mile away. I stop there all the time. I love to get my chicken nuggets, and I'm always greeted by a friendly smile when I get my food. And I really appreciate all of McDonald's crew members who make that happen. So whether you know that one crew member who always remembers you like your Big Mac with an extra pickle, or the crew member who always greets you in the drive-thru with a warm smile, thank you, McDonald's crew members everywhere, for making our McDonald's visits even more special. McDonald's, I'm
I'm
loving it.
loving it.
We're both loving it. All right, Patrick, let's get to the rest of the episode. We're like half an hour in. We haven't even started talking about the actual episode yet.
Okay.
So
Can I make a pitch?
Please.
Can we give the people what they want?
What is that, Patrick?
Start with the content.
Okay. Well, I mean, we're gonna have to fast forward a little bit, but that's fine.
A little bit. The
So
content is kind of removed from
sure.
most
I
of the
mean,
rest of it.
so last week, Karn had stolen credits from his mom and was using it to travel to Ferrix.
He got
And
he
we
got a
see that
call from old Linus Mosk.
I guess he paid for Linus to travel to Ferrix as well. They're dressed like Ferrix commoners, and they kind of trade hats on the ship, I think, as a way of kind of
One of my
improving
favorite
their
moments in the
disguises.
episode is
Yeah.
just this wide shot of them on the space bus. The Ferrix space bus is one of my favorite things from this whole show. Just watching normal people on public transportation. But I love just this wide shot of them just sitting across the aisle from each other, just silently. They trade hats. They put on their little hats. I'm not sure why they trade. I mean, I think they correctly figured out which one suited which of them better. It's great.
I think that's right, and they just to enhance their disguises. You know, that was kind of my sense of it. Anyway, they get there. Karn sees Miro there managing everything. He's like, oh, "It's her!" You know, he lights up. There she is. Obviously, the riot breaks out, and then Miro is almost torn limb from limb by the rioters. But Karn steps in and saves her ass. This is the opposite of what we thought would happen, or what was speculated might happen, which is like Karn ruins things. He actually saves her life. It's a great scene. She's very shaken. She's like,
she's fully in shock right now. Like,
yeah, she's fully in shock, and
it's exciting to see because, she's always, I mean, especially recently, she's so in control. She loves like interrogating and stuff like that. From the look of it, I don't think she's ever actually experienced like combat before.
Right.
She's a bit mostly a bureaucrat. And so she is just like in shock. Like her body is like just like shaking. And the look on her face when she says, "You," when she sees Syril Karn like in this cramped little room on Ferrix, it's incredible.
We got an email from Lauren writing into decodingtv@gmail.com. Literally, the episode debuted on Disney Plus 9 hours ago as we're recording this. So we are just getting right into it at midnight. So it has not been that long. Lauren D has written into decodingtv@gmail.com. She's watched the episode. She's written in before she got this email in before we even started recording. She says, quote, "Just popping in to ask, is Syril? I knew that. Is this the new I love you, I know of Star Wars?" Less jokingly, though, I was thrilled that the story was left how that story thread left off in this finale. Dedra saying, "I should thank you," was just such a her way to put that. Does she feel gratitude? Maybe. She was definitely in a jam. But I feel like their history and her pride would make it really hard for her to feel it genuinely. And she's probably still loath to encourage him literally stalking her.
Yeah, this is, I mean, I loved what we got here. But like trying to like just thinking about like, I mean, I imagine she's having a hard time even articulating thoughts in words because she's in shock. This guy who she thought was a loser and then stalked her and she was creeped out by, then suddenly saves her life. And now they're in this like small cramped room together. And so he's not a person that she would want to save her. She probably doesn't even want to be saved, right? Because she does things herself. But now it's like, oh God, I should be grateful. But it's this guy. But also, he did save my life. Also, I'm in shock and can't think straight. There's so much going on here,
right?
And also, we have gotten reports that Kyle Soller, who plays Syril Karn, is on set for season 2.
Woo!
So he's back, baby. And so we don't know how big that time jump will be, but I can't wait to see what it holds for Kiro.
I mean, I have a feeling we're going to be seeing some pasty little babies next season. You know,
I wouldn't go
some
that
pasty
far.
little white kids, you know, that have the Kiro last name. You know, I think is what's going to happen.
Honestly, that would delight me. My guess is that maybe she feels obliged to give him a job, and then
Mm-hmm.
it's this thing where she's like his superior,
Mm-hmm.
and he's clearly like a weirdo who is into her, and she doesn't love that, but also he like gets, he meets his quotas and stuff like that, so she's just kind of like dealing with this guy who has this
Mm-hmm.
crush on her. That's my
Mm-hmm.
guess.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You know, Patrick, some people have said it's a little bit weird you guys are spending so much time talking about these two fascists and hoping they get together. And my reaction to that is if it is wrong to ship Dedra Miro and Cyril Karn, I do not wish to be right.
David, I don't know if I've ever agreed more with something you said.
Thank you. Thank you, Patrick. Okay.
I'm on absolutely the same page here. And also, to those people, have you watched the show? Have you seen the chemistry just lighting up the screen?
I,
Like,
it's incandescent, sir. Okay. Uh, let's talk about stuff that happened before the funeral. We'll talk about Coruscant stuff. We'll talk about stuff that happened after the funeral, right? Before the funeral, there's a lot of setup. Miro arrives. You know, being a girl boss is hard because she's just flown in. They're like, hey, do you want to eat some food? You know, do you want to hang out a little bit? She's like, no, I need to start patrolling everything and making sure everything's ready for our big day tomorrow. You know,
and they're also the Empire is really enjoying just giving the people of Ferrix a hard time about their funeral procession. It's like,
mhm.
well, they wanted to start at this time, but we made them shift it back 2 hours, and they have like the exact parameters of like, here is where they will be. Like, they've got this whole thing scoped out.
Yeah.
But a really key thing here, I think, is that the Empire's general instinct, as we see when we see the ISB dealing with like the aftermath of the Anto Krieger thing, where they just wipe out his entire group. The Empire's instinct is always just like, oh, just kill them all. Just right away, just shoot all the people. And they're telling Dedra that, oh, and we're going to have snipers in place around here. And she's like, no. Uh, our whole plan here is to get him alive and interrogate him and find out who Axis is. Like, stop. Like, and she's also pissed off when she finds out that Krieger's whole group was just slaughtered. She's like, we need to actually like get information from some of these people, like just killing them all. Like, I know you love sending a message, or I believe as Partagast says, wiping the taste of Ferric, wiping the taste of Aldani from the Emperor's mouth. It's they love to do that, but she really wants to catch people and interrogate them.
Yes. Vel and Luthen arrive at various times. Vel confronts Cinta. Cinta's really into the job. She's like, "Hey, look at all the stuff that's happening. We got to get to this place before that." You know, and Vel's like, "Good to see you too." You know, Cinta's just clearly in a whole other mind space, and Vel says, "Hey, I need you to look at me, like step away from the thing." And they have a nice moment, and I was like, "Oh, this is very moving." And then the moment ends, and then like we never really come back to like what their relationship is. And I kind of would have loved a little bit more there, but you know,
I mean, except for the part when Vel is like, "You have blood on you," and Cinta goes, "It's not mine."
yes, that's right. That's right. But it was a very moving scene. That part. There's a few scenes with Zanwan, who is the person that told Cassian last week that his mom is dead. He tells Brasso what's going on. I love these scenes because you see like people working in the back, the sparks flying. You see like the whole setting feels alive the whole time, right? And you see like the goings on at Ferrix that are happening day to day, even without everything that's happening and in the show. And it's really cool. Nurchi is the guy who overhears what's going on and trades this information for theoretically his own benefit.
Well,
Right?
Nurchi was the guy in the very first episode who
Yes.
confronted Cassian in the street because Cassian owes him money. So he's just had this beef with Cassian since before the show began. And and this is the thing. He's like, he kind of picks up on, he's like, something's up with Zanwan, and there's the scene where they're at the bar, and the stuff with Zanwan is interesting because he doesn't seem like a guy who wants to get involved in anything. He just gets stuck in the situation because he happens to answer the phone when Cassian calls. And he's the one who happens to give him the information that his mother died. And so suddenly it's like, it seems like he doesn't want to know that Cassian is going to come there, but he has, but he's like stuck with this information. And then Nershi can tell there's something up with him. And when they're at the bar, he's kind of like, leading him toward like getting him to reveal that maybe Cassian is going to come back, because he just wants to then, throw him under the bus, get paid more, and finally get back at him for not paying him the money.
He does it in such a smart, underhanded way too. He's like, "Oh, if you know Cassie's alive, don't tell me." And then that way he has like deniability. But Cassian does return, of course. He meets up with, I think it's Pegla, his friend who like helps him navigate the underground.
Well, first he hops over. He goes to thinking he's going to meet up with Bix.
Yeah,
and hopping over the wall, there's the Corellian hounds, and here's a quick question about the Corellian hounds. Are those a mix of like animatronic practical effects in some shots and CG in others? Because they look incredible.
They look really good. I was thinking they might have taken actual large dogs and like put prosthetics on them. That's but I think they're CG is my guess. But
yeah, it's in some of those close-ups, they look so tactile in a way that CGI animals like that usually often, even the best of them, it's like, oh well, I know this is a cartoon, and I'm like, they look as tactile as like B2 emo, and so I'm just curious about the Corellian hounds. But yeah, Bix is not there, obviously.
Yeah. And Cassian has a conversation with Brasso about Marva. There's this moment when like it's easy to forget. It's been like a week of time in real life, but it's only been overnight since last episode. And so Core realizes something's wrong when Brasso doesn't emerge from the house with B2 Emo. It's some other guy that they dress up to look like Brasso. But Brasso's actually hanging out with Cassian underground. He communicates Marva's last words, which are very moving, and kind of gives Cassian motivation. And I do want to give credit where credit is due. I mean, obviously all the dialogue in the show is excellent in general, but the fundamental arc of Cassian Andor is largely delivered on in this first season, right? Like, I think they do a great job of like, he's listening to Nemec's manifesto. The manifesto is like really great. He is hearing Marva's last words. He's gone through everything he's gone through. And at the end of the day, you understand why he might go from, I'm only in it for myself, to, okay, Luthen, let's team up and let's go, right? And so anyway, just want to acknowledge that Brasso scene before we move on. But
I mean, I think, honestly, I'm just going to say here, Brasso is like the hero of this episode to me. Like, Brasso is like the best guy. He's like a great friend. He's the guy who leads the funeral procession and carries Marva's brick, which he then like beats a guy with, which rules.
Which Marva would have loved that, I think.
Oh my god, yes. That. Brasso is just such a stand-up guy, absolute legend.
I mean, he started the series being willing to lie to get Andor out of jail, basically.
Yeah, and I like how I believe Corv refers to him as the big guy.
Yeah. So anyway, a lot of stuff is happening before the funeral. They're planning the funeral. There's supposed to be 40 people there. It's supposed to start at a certain time, and that's basically all the pre-funeral stuff. Anything else, Patrick, before we get to Coruscant and then what happens after the funeral begins?
Just a couple little things I want to mention. There's a nice little sound mixing choice in the short scene when Cassian is listening to Nemec's manifesto, where you hear the manifesto. It's as like clearly being played through the speakers of the little device he's holding.
Yeah,
and then you see like Cassian stand up, and the audio effect on Nemec talking shifts from like coming out of a speaker to just being clear voiceover, which kind of to me communicates the idea that it's like, oh, even when he has like turned it off, he's still thinking about it. It's still with him, and this is like a thing that he's now like actively thinking about a lot, and like Nemec is still with him like long after his death.
I love that.
I thought that was really nice, and just I mean, I wish I had the script here in front of me, but in that scene where he meets with Brasso in like kind of like the sewer, basically, just I think it's a really lovely scene, and you know, Cassian is so upset about how, you know, his last conversation with Marva, like they argued, and he had wanted to take her away to stay with him, and she wouldn't go, and you know, now he like and that he missed being there, and just the like the met like and it seems like Brasso basically recites like verbatim her final message to him. Like he made a point.
And I love the performance, because it felt like when he started saying, he had the look of someone who had like practiced saying it. Like
exactly,
it was like you could see the conversation. She had told him like, hey, you need to memorize these words exactly, and he was kind of like saying it as though he had like practiced it a bunch of times.
Yeah, like the final thing of like she wants you to know that she loves you more than anything you could do wrong. I'm just like, this is really good. Like Marva really makes an impression for a character who is dead before this episode begins.
Totally. We got a couple of scenes on Coruscant this episode as well. There's a scene where Mon is in a car. She's waiting for Perrin. Perrin comes in, and they have a big argument. Cloris is supposed to give them privacy, but he's listening in because he's actually a Blevin agent, as we find out.
I mean, I think we'd already established that that her new driver that she got earlier this season was an ISB plant. Like, she's aware of that.
She was. I don't think it was confirmed, but she was extremely suspicious. But I think what we are supposed to deduce from this episode is she assumed it. She figured it out, or she assumed it, and that's why she planted this information of like, where did Perrin get the money from?
Right.
There was
because I gotta say, like normally, like her little security thing of being like, hey, was it Corvus is his name?
Yeah.
Hey Corvus, can you
Cloris.
Yeah. Hey, can you turn off like the mic so you can't hear us? Just like obviously you can't just assume that he's going to, you know, give you the privacy you ask for, because and he doesn't. He literally just like switches off and then right back on.
Yeah. But there's a few nice touches about this scene. So first of all, she mentions Cantobite, which is a planet that is seen in The Last Jedi, Episode 8.
The casino world.
It's in the context of, hey, don't gamble on Coruscant. Like, if you need to get your gambling out of your system, go to Cantobite or wherever else and take care of it there. We're also covering The Crown on Decoding TV at podcast.decodingtv.com. And be sure to subscribe to make sure you listen to that. But this is a common thing that happens in The Crown, is somebody wants to have sex with someone or do something that they're not supposed to be able to do as a royal. And it's like, do what you got to do quietly, like in a place where no one can see you do it, and then come back and live your life as a royal person. It's a very similar scene. It's like, hey, look, we have responsibilities as a senator. You have responsibilities as a senator's husband. Do what you got to do, and then, you know, but I did like that. That was hey, Cantobites has a purpose other than being a fun diversion in Star Wars Episode 8. So
it's also just one of those things because, you know, like discourse around the sequel trilogy is weird, and you know,
you don't say, Patrick. You don't say.
I know, but it's one of those. And despite being a person who I'm just like, if I had my way, I would wipe Rise of Skywalker from canon forever. But I still, at the same time, I think there are like there's stuff in the sequel trilogy that I love. There's one movie that I love, but I'm just happy when other Star Wars things like acknowledge it. Like acknowledge its contributions to the overall like lore and mythology. And so, yeah, just simply hearing something like, it's like when you hear mention to like of Jakku or something like that.
Right,
Uh,
right.
I'm just like, I'm always, and also because like Canto Bight, it's the kind of thing where I'm just like, yeah, why? Like I remember watching The Last Jedi and thinking like, why haven't we seen a place like this before? It like
Hmm.
obviously this would exist in this world. It's not all just people living in like miserable desert or ice worlds. Like,
Right.
where do the rich go on vacation? And so it's the kind of little like callback to a previous thing that is like that just makes so much sense. Of course, that's where Perrin would go to gamble.
Uh, there is a scene where Blevin gets the information from Cloris, and he's like, "Oh wow, we got to keep our eyes on Mon because we could use this information. This could be very good for us." And then you find out that Anto Krieger and all his men were massacred at Spellhouse. Um, and then finally, there's a scene with 3 shots, as you indicated earlier, where we find out that Mon does end up making the introduction to Davos Skeldon's family. Basically, is potentially agreeing to marry off her daughter to this warlord, thug, criminal, whatever you want to call him.
It looks like a very formal kind of like traditional, like the way one family is presented to the other with like
Yes.
the like I don't know 14-year-old child in the middle, flanked by both parents. The
Yeah.
doors open. I gotta say, Lita looks kind of happy about this.
Yeah, we talked about this like last week or the week before, but basically, like, I think the show's setting up that like she's going to be happy with it. Mon is not, and I'm of 2 minds about this whole situation, Patrick. On the one hand, I have said all season the Mon storyline feels a little bit underbaked. Would have liked more, more um, flesh on that, more meat on that bone. On the other hand, this show Andor backdoored a Mon Mothma prequel, and it's like, okay, like I don't hate that at all. Like I thought it's really cool. It gave this character. That's what's prequeling at its best, is like this side character whose most memorable stuff was like the outfit and one line she said in Return of the Jedi. Now has like a much richer story. And I'll look forward to see where it goes in season 2. I do think overall it's underbaked, but it's cool that we got Mon at all. Like that's not one of the things I thought we would really get a lot of in this show, and we have got a lot of her. So that's
Yeah,
cool.
I'm on the record as saying I loved a lot of the Mon stuff. It was really just I think like the banking stuff got a little bit like obtuse and vague for me over a couple episodes,
Yeah.
but I really like where we are now, and I'm excited in season 2 to see the journey of how Mon ends up with her terrible haircut that she will eventually have.
Yeah, her hair is really good in the show.
Oh, her hair
So
is like immaculate in this.
yeah,
And you
yeah.
look at her in Rogue One and then in Return of the Jedi, and it's like, what happened?
Mm-hmm.
Not to be the guy who like has strong opinions about like,
Well, I think
women's hair.
if there's anyone who is an expert at talking about hair in general, it's you and me, Patrick. I
Oh,
mean,
exactly.
right?
We're the experts.
Yeah,
Because
everyone should defer to our opinion on it. So,
it's because we're so jealous of Mon's hair that we think about it a lot. But yeah,
so
but look, I mean, all I'm saying is you compare Mon's look in Rogue One with her look here, and that is a whatever the opposite of a glow up is.
okay, fair enough. So anyway, that's the Mon storyline for this season. Um, on Ferrix, the funeral procession begins. The procession begins early. There's way more people than authorized that are there. All the procession stuff was awesome. Like you have people playing space instruments.
Okay, the space instruments, the like space trumpets and flutes and stuff. They reminded me a lot of the instruments from the animated How the Grinch Stole Christmas.
Mm-hmm.
That you see like the Who's playing like on Christmas morning with that are like, trumpets with like a bunch of loops in them and stuff like that.
Right. It's like a flute, but it has like 10 more pieces of metal on it. It's like, yeah, it's amazing. And you barely see it. You see like a few shots of it. It's probably has, 30 seconds of screen time when you can really make out what's going on, but you can tell so much care and detail was put into it. So.
It's great. Like here's a question that I'm genuinely going to ask, and I'm sure and Star Wars experts, send an email to decodingtv@gmail.com and tell me why I'm incorrect. But at this point,
don't do that.
Does Ferrix have the most fully developed culture of any Star Wars planet we've seen?
Other than Coruscant, perhaps, right?
I think even more than Coruscant, because Coruscant it's a city. That's mostly it. But like we know so much about the traditions of the people on Ferrix. We know we know what the people like the different kind of jobs the regular people have. There's like actual communities of normal people who have like normal lives. It just like watching this procession down down Rix Road. There's one I have to point it out, incredible like aerial, probably drone shot, going down, like starting with like kind of the Imperial blockade and then moving up and over,
and it like tilts up and then you move over it. It's amazing.
Yeah, you see all these like the whole town pretty much, like all parading down the street. You have like the Daughters of Ferrix, like the social group that Marva was a part of, coming in from one street. You have like the band coming in from another, and they like meet in the middle and all walk down together. And I was just thinking, like, this is like they really put in the work to flesh out and like develop this entire like just the culture and society of this place, and it feels so real.
I agree. There's so many little touches that like they didn't quote unquote have to do, right? Like the glove wall is a really great example.
We see it again.
It's like we see it again. One of my favorite lines from the episode is, I think it's Nurchi is talking about like, oh yeah, having Brasso placing your stone, it just breaks your heart. The idea that like Andor not being there to place Marva's stone, it's a huge like tragedy basically, and it's like, oh, like there's a whole culture around like you must place your loved one's stone, and if you don't, and it's like, oh wow, like it's a throwaway line, but it's like it kind of alludes to this world that we barely get a glimpse of in this show, right?
And then Marva's speech, especially where she talks a lot about like past funerals she attended and stuff like that on Ferrix, also fleshes it out more. And I cannot neglect to mention the hammer guy in the tower, who gets an amazing moment in this episode.
Yes, when he gets stormed by a stormtrooper and then kicks the guy off of the roof of the Anvil Tower. It's amazing.
Yeah,
spectacular. Classic Star Wars. Classic Star Wars.
So I'm just saying, please tell me if there is another planet or culture in the Star Wars canon that is like as detailed and well developed as Ferrix, because
someone's going to write in and say it's in the Clone Wars, Patrick, and Patrick's going to be like, well, I'm still not watching it.
It's that weird planet that Darth Maul and the witches are from, which is actually a cool planet. I can't remember what it's called. Anyway, moving on.
So the procession begins early. B2 EMO projects a hologram into the sky. It's a giant Marva, and Marva gives this speech, and it's great. She talks about, I'll read a couple. I wrote some notes down, some quotes from the speech.
I almost did, and I was like, David will have written notes down.
Yeah, this is I'll just read a few passages. Like, I fear for you. We've been sleeping. We've had each other and Ferrix, our work, our days. We had each other, and they left us alone. We kept the trade lanes open. They left us alone. We took their money and ignored them. And the moment they pulled away, we forgot them because we had each other. We had Ferrix, but we were sleeping. I've been sleeping. I've been turning away from the truth I wanted not to face. There's a wound that won't heal at the center of the galaxy. There's a darkness reaching like rust into everything around us. We let it grow, and now it's here. It's here, and it's not visiting anymore. It wants to stay. The Empire is a disease that thrives in the darkness. It's never more alive than when we sleep. End quote. So that's not the whole thing. That's just a few select passages from it, but it's great. And of course, like part of me is like, hey, maybe the Imperial Guard should have stopped this thing before it got to the riot part of it. But On the other hand, they're kind of like sitting by and being like, I want to see where she's going with this.
I know. Also, a guy that I have to shout out, Captain Vanis Tigo,
Yes.
played by Wilf Scolding, who's kind of on the ground. He is the main Imperial officer.
Yes. Yes.
He's the prefect, right?
Yeah, he's the one that throws the blanket on like B2MO at the end.
Yes, unsuccessfully.
Yeah.
He also the guy who gives the order to open fire on the crowd. But he, I think, is one of the best, like, sniveling, hateable Imperial officers we've ever seen in Star Wars. Because you can, like, again, he is so... He seems pretty confident that they've got this blockade set up. Like, they're... Like, they have these people under control. And watching... And, like... The editing during Marva's speech, I think, is so effective as it's like, it's building and building and building, and Nicholas Bertel's score is building and building and building, and we're cutting around to all these reaction shots, and you can see Tigo there getting a little bit more concerned as it gets further and further on into full-on, leading a revolt language, and I just think it's really effective stuff, and basically this speech that she gives is pretty much the mission statement of this show. It is about like, how ordinary people just trying to live their lives get pushed to the point of violent revolt because it is the only option. And that's, I feel like, what Tony Gilroy wanted to make the show about.
It's about that, but it's also, I think, about how it's easy to let fascism intrude into your world. Like, it's very easy to forget that it's there, and you have to be vigilant about it, because it's easy to live a life of comfort. It's easy to be hanging out, watching your Disney Pluses and podcasting about your Star Warses, right? And then meanwhile, fascist forces have infiltrated our government, and before you know it, there's no turning back. Like that's kind of what I saw it as. Like, hey, things were comfortable, but like, don't mistake comfort for good. Don't mistake like absence of any like active atrocities for like things are going okay right now.
Right.
And so,
I mean, you even think back to like the Empire straight up like executed Marva's husband for not actually doing anything wrong, and she still, tried to put it aside and just live her life. And,
right. She lived
and
what seems to be like a largely normal life. Like after, she didn't join the revolution or anything until Aldani, as far as we know. Right. So anyway, yeah, I found that part of the speech very effective. So,
yeah. Also, I think we should mention during this, Cassian is like in this kind of outpost. He's high up in this building, and he's like watching everything that's happening. And he sees that Luthen is there. And figures out
that Luthen's there to kill him. Right, exactly.
Yeah, and they also
Luthen, who
it seems that Karn has also figured out what building Cassian is in. Just like watching the way that like is a Karn who like someone says he's in that building.
Yeah, it's not Karn, I don't think.
Okay.
Karn. So basically, a few things.
It's
first
Corv,
of all,
I think.
First of all, I think you're thinking of like Nemik's manifesto is kind of what you were alluding to earlier. Of like, he's describing how people kind of get pushed into like the Nemik manifesto. I think resembled a lot more what you're talking about just now about like how people get pushed. Every act of rebellion is helping the rebellion, like that kind of stuff, and it was very good. In terms of the Karn stuff, what happens is Nurchi figures out where Andor is. Nurchi gives the information to Corv. There's a cool scene where Nurchi's like, pretend you're arresting me, and like that all played out very plausibly. And then Miro goes to the Andor building, and then Karn sees Miro going to the Andor. It all happens very quickly. So
okay.
But then Miro does not find Andor in the building because Andor has escaped underground. Is basically what has happened.
Yes, and then by the time Marva's speech ends, Cassian is already in the hotel where Bix is being held.
Yes, I think that's right. Yeah. So the Marva speech ends, and we haven't discussed that in this episode, the episode I think opened with a shot of what's his name? I wrote it down specifically so I wouldn't forget. Wilman is the character's name, played by Mohammed Bear. Wilman is Pack's son.
Yes.
Pack is a character that was murdered last episode or a few episodes ago.
The guy who worked with Bix.
Who literally his only crime was letting Bix use his radio. Is what, and so Pack's son, Wilman, built a bomb and kind of chucked it into the Imperial Guards and, at the beginning of the riot. This scene, by the way...
Not right at the start. Like, the bomb is not what begins... Like, basically, the end of Marva's speech is her, like, shouting at everyone to fight the Empire. And then, basically, Brasso just, like, just kicks over a guard and, like, screams and is like, it has begun.
Yes. And I want to say that this scene with Wilman throwing the bomb is extremely similar to the opening scene from a Netflix movie called Athena.
I still haven't watched Athena yet.
Here's my request of you, Patrick.
I'm going to. Don't worry.
Watch the opening shot of Athena. That's all.
Which is like what, 11 minutes long or so?
I think it's longer. I think it might be 12 or 18 minutes. It's around that. Watch the opening shot of Athena, but the opening shot of Athena kicks off in an extremely similar way, basically, where somebody whose family member has died at the hands of law enforcement officers builds a bomb and chucks it into a thing. Like that's how the movie begins. And so it reminded me of Athena, and also if you're listening to this, watch the opening scene of Athena, which is on Netflix right now. Somewhat similar themes to Andor, although very controversial in terms of how some of the scenes play out. But Athena is an incredible movie. Is kind of what I'm trying to get across. I predict there will be a video essay from Patrick Willems one day that references or potentially is about Athena. I'm going to just put that way. Okay.
Bold statement, and
I'm throwing it down.
From what I'm aware of about the movie, I don't think that's inaccurate.
It's a staggering piece of filmmaking. Okay.
Yeah, I'm still mad. I missed it during its 1 week, 1 theater run in New York.
Mm-hmm.
I just at the last minute had to miss its final showing. Anyway.
You got to promise me you're going to watch the opening scene of Athena sometime. That's all. You don't. It doesn't need to be this weekend, Patrick. But like,
David, yeah. I mean, it is like 2022 will not end with me not having seen Athena.
Okay.
And here's the thing. This was my plan before this episode.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, I'll tell you, Patrick. Here's my request: watch Athena before our bonus episode that we record next week, if you can, and we'll talk about it a little bit. I'd love to hear your thoughts.
I will.
Right. Cool. Okay. Sorry for the Athena derailment.
They loved it.
But basically, Wilman throws this bomb, and then it like knocks over a bucket of grenades. Don't you hate it when that happens, when your bucket of grenades gets knocked over, Patrick? Initiating a cascade of explosions.
Such a bummer. That kills Nurchi.
Among
other people.
The explosion is incredible. Like the explosion, you see the glass blown out, and it like knocks all these people back. Nurchi dies. Zanwan dies. The people start opening fire on the crowd.
That's not how Zanwan dies.
Yeah. Zanwan dies after they open fire on people, right?
Yeah. That this is like, at first it seems like a thing that they can maybe contain because it's just unarmed people. I mean, Brasso has the brick that he does use to beat people, which is awesome. But it seems like a thing that's in like, they're the Empire. They have tanks and stuff. But also the bomb flips over the tank they have. And then it's just pure chaos. And I will say, it's funny, this reminded me of a movie that most of us don't love, but there's a shot of Vel that is just like a shot of Ben Affleck at the beginning of Batman v Superman, of her sprinting into the cloud of like dust and smoke that is coming from like an explosion in a city.
It's it's an incredible like all-timer shot, like, because basically she's running in, and then like it goes from you can see everything to like it's just her and smoke. It's an incredible shot. I don't know if it was digitally enhanced, but it looks amazing.
It looks great, and then it's just chaos in the streets. Tigo just like hiding for cover, screams to open fire. You've got stormtroopers like up on like balconies, just shooting into the crowd. It is honestly like it's upsetting stuff to watch. Brasso headbutts a stormtrooper, which is great. And Zanwan, the guy who mostly wanted to not be involved very much, at one point there's a great moment where he like jumps on the back of a stormtrooper, like pounding its head, then gets shot and killed, and then falls down dead to the ground, and the camera just holds on a close-up of his expressionless face with his eyes still open for a good like 5 seconds. Again, not a thing we're used to seeing in Star Wars.
It cuts to B2EMO also lying on the ground, and I didn't know if it was a B2EMO POV shot. It was unclear to me whether that was the case. But anyway,
B2EMO does make it out alive.
Yes. So Cassian gets Bix, Brasso, B2EMO, I think as well, right, to the ship, and they get away. He gives them these really cool instructions, like, can they make it to Ganji Moon? Stay all the way low to the far side of the sea. The moment you get over the blah, 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 you climb. Like, your life is depending on, it's a great speech he gives. And then Cassian confronts Luthen. I think that's... Anything else about the funeral procession and what happens afterwards that we should mention?
I mean, we've obviously already talked about Karn and Dedra Miro, and I mean we don't get any kind of final like tally of like how many people died or survived on Ferrix, but clearly this whole group here are just like fleeing their home at the end. The situation on Ferrix is dire, but and even Luthen then just sees all this and just like, I just have to get out of here. Like no matter what happened with Cassian, I need to leave. Like it's not worth sticking around and looking for him. And we see the final scene is we follow Luthen on his little speeder bike thing, going back to his ship. He gets on his ship. He's getting ready to leave, and then Cassian is there waiting for him. And Cassian is like, "You came here to kill me." And Luthen, basically just owns up to it and is like, "Yeah, that was it." And Cassian basically just puts a blaster down for him to use, and the episode ends with him, just making the offer like, either kill me now or take me in.
Yeah, it's a great scene, I think, because Cassian kind of understands all the angles as usual, right? He's like, what are my choices here? If I kill Luthen, which he has Luthen dead to rights. Like, he can murder Luthen if he wants. But he's like, if I kill Luthen, I'm going to be running for a long time, because Luthen probably has some backup plan where if he dies, like Cassian, there's going to be he's going to be running. And it's like, and at this point, the show needs to convince you that Cassian actually wants to join Luthen. And I think it has done that. Cassian has lost everything. And he has lost all of his friends. His friends hate him. Some of his friends have died or been tortured. He's lost his mom. He's lost his dad to the Empire. And it's like, he's realized, like, look, I barely want to live anymore, but if I'm going to live, I might as well live fighting the Empire.
He tried to run away to Neamos, and then got thrown in prison for doing nothing, and then missed being there when his mother died. He can't escape this. The Empire has taken everything from him. And now he's on board.
Anything else to say about the episode? And I mean, we have to talk about the mid-credit scene or the post-credit scene, but before that,
there is a post-credit scene.
Yeah, but before that, I'm curious. Anything else you want to say about the episode? I loved the. I just love the idea of like, hey, I'm gonna give because he knows the only way he can really get on board, the only way he can trust Luthen, is if he gives Luthen a blaster and it's like, you can kill me or take me in, because it's like, other than that, he will never know what Luthen's true thoughts are.
Right.
You know, if he like holds up Luthen, is like, Luthen, take me in. You know, it's like that's not going to work. He needs to give Luthen the power in order to make it work. So it's very smart. Cassian's a very smart guy. I love that about him. You know.
Me too. It's also nice to see them back together finally after like 8 episodes.
Yeah. You know, we already talked about this, but I do want to say, like, obviously, there's a big open question of whether Cassian's going to reunite with his buddies. It is worth noting that we don't see Bix or Brasso in Rogue One, so it's like, who knows what their fate is. We don't see Luthen in Rogue One, so who knows what their fate is. But
yeah, we just all we know is Melshi makes it.
Yeah, Bix says he'll find us. You know, he'll find us. I'll find you. You know, I think they will meet again. Right? I would be surprised if they didn't meet again in season 2.
But also, I gotta say, I really hope that like Bix and Brasso and everyone, I don't know, go somewhere and get to chill out and like relax a little bit.
Yes, please. Maybe try to get over the wailing screams of those children or whatever that Bix hears in her nightmares.
Yeah.
Anyway. Okay. Well, that's the episode. Overall, some really great stuff. I continue, you know, I've already complained about the Luthen's plan stuff. Oh, Cinta killing Korv. That just felt like, I don't know that we particularly needed to have a resolution on Korv's fate. You know, like, I don't know what the purpose of her killing Korv was really. Like, it's just like, okay, it felt like a clumsy way to wrap up that storyline, I guess, is kind of what my feeling is.
Well, hey, it delivered on what, oh god, was it Skeen said back in like episode 4 or 5 that she's like the hardest of all of them.
Yeah. Fair enough. Okay. So that's the episode. And then, solid finale. Not certainly not bad at all. The funeral stuff was all great. Karn Tent Miro stuff was all great. There are some things but it just feels like, oh wow, like it felt like a lot of setup for season 2, which I am now very much looking forward to. But yeah.
Yeah,
anyway.
I mean, it's not my favorite episode of the season, but I think it was a really strong ending to genuinely one of my favorite shows of the year.
100%. I mean, I compare it to like other endings from this year. You know, Severance season 1, House of the Dragon season 1. Those felt to me like real endings in a way that this one didn't quite. It felt like 80% of like a really solid season 1 ending.
So I have not yet caught up on the House of the Dragon finale. I think I have like 3 episodes left to watch. But Severance ends on a huge cliffhanger.
Yes. But even then, but it still feels like it like delivered like on most of the stuff that was brought up in season 1.
Fully.
In my opinion.
I mean,
but yeah,
you know, no spoilers for the Severance finale, a show that I recommend everyone watch. But you know, that is a finale that kind of blows up the status quo and throws a ton of balls in the air and then like ends. And you're there like screaming at the television because you're like, I have to wait a year to find out what happens next. And this was not quite there, but also I don't think it's like quite trying to do the same thing. Here's the thing. Thematically, I think this thematically and in terms of our central character, I think this got us exactly where we needed to be and where it wanted to get us. And I think that's what's most important.
I agree. I think that's fair enough. Let's talk briefly about the post-credit scene. So I had brought up the speculation. I don't think I was the one that thought it up, but somebody emailed us, I think, or somebody commented at youtube.com/decoding TV and said like, do you think that Cassian and the people on Narkina 5 are building the Death Star, parts that are going to the Death Star? And that is basically confirmed in the post-credits. It's those same like metal units, like those star-shaped metal units that they're building on Narkina 5. You find out are like joints basically in the dish, in the main dish in the Death Star, right?
For like the super laser,
the super laser.
And I will say there's a nice little bit
I was like, Patrick's gonna hate this.
No, I mean, it's like, here's the thing. It makes sense. It's like, I mean, it's the closest to the kind of like, you know, like I guess, oh my God, what is the term? I'm
Easter egg?
It's the closest to an Easter egg or like fan service thing that the show has mostly avoided. But I'm also like, there is a nice bit of little of poetry there. I guess that like Cassian was spent all this time building pieces for the thing that is eventually going to kill him, but that he will also eventually help take down.
Yeah. No, I like that. That's good.
Yeah.
Somebody at Vulture did a great write-up about the ending of Andor, and they brought up like some of the timeline stuff that's kind of weird. So, in Revenge of the Sith, so Andor takes place 5 BBY before the Battle of Yavin, right? Revenge of the Sith takes place 19 BBY, right? In Revenge of the Sith, we see the beginnings of the Death Star. Like there's a skeleton-sized, like a skeleton of the Death Star in Revenge of the Sith. You know what I'm talking about? Patrick, I think you muted yourself.
I did. Oh yeah, like they're starting to build. There's that shot of Darth Vader like looking out the window of the Star Destroyer. I forgot about that.
So that and we know that Rogue One takes place 0 BBY. So that means that it took 19 years to build the first Death Star, right? But the second Death Star only took less than 4 years to build. The second fully operational Death Star took less than 4 years to build between Star Wars Episode 4 and 6.
Well, David, you have to remember that Galen Erso like bailed on the project, and it probably slowed him down a lot for I don't know, several years, and they had to go get him back.
As the Vulture writer suspected, maybe the working conditions on Narkina 6 are just way more deplorable than the working conditions on Narkina 5. So also a possibility, but
could be
anyway. Yeah. Obviously they already built the first one, so they're like, oh, we already know it. Let's just speed run what we did last time. That's basically what they decided, probably.
Right.
So
hey, we
learned so much in this process, right? Like,
exactly. Maybe secretly on some other planet, they were just already building a backup Death Star all this time, just in case.
Exactly. We don't know. All right. Well, that's going to bring us to the end of our recap of Season 1, Episode 12 of Andor. It's been a really fun season, and we really appreciate people joining us for this journey. I appreciate Patrick Willems joining me for this journey. We will be back with another bonus episode. So if you have any reactions, thoughts, strong disagreements to what David Chen says, probably
theories about what might happen with Karn and Miro.
Yes. decodingtv@gmail.com. Patrick and I will discuss them all. And again, podcast.decodingtv.com is where you can find more episodes, and find us on YouTube, TikTok, and Twitter at Decoding TV. Also on Instagram, by the way, at Decoding
We're
TV.
everywhere.
David,
everywhere. Are we on Hive and Mastodon?
No, we're not, Patrick. But thank you so much for listening. Thanks, Patrick, for joining. And decodingtv@gmail.com. Let us know what you thought. We'll see you next week. He is Patrick Willems. I am David Chen. Until next week, have a happy holiday weekend, and we'll talk again soon. Goodbye. Hey everyone, David Chen here. Thank you so much for watching that video from Decoding TV. If you want to get an audio version of the show, all you got to do is go to podcast.decodingtv.com. And if you want to support what we do, get ad-free episodes of the podcast and also bonus episodes of the podcast, go to decodingtv.com and become a paid member. Of course, you can also like and subscribe for more. We appreciate it. Thanks. See you later.